Welcome back. If you are new here and you have not watched part 1, stop right now and go watch it first. The link is in the description. You will not understand the weight of what is about to happen in this video without it. For those of you who have been in the comments demanding justice, this one is for you. The man who took her child was about to lose everything. She walked in like she had already won, not with arrogance, not with performance. With the specific, calibrated stillness of a woman who had spent 6 years being underestimated by people with more money than conscience, and had decided, finally, to let them find out what that had cost them. The press conference room at the Lagos Continental Hotel was packed. Journalists from 4 countries, 2 television crews, a photographer from a wire service whose images would be on 3 continents before the hour was out. They had been told only that a statement would be made regarding what the invitation called a matter of significant international legal concern. They had come because the Kang name was in the press release. They stayed because of the woman who walked to the podium. Juliet Ademi set a manila folder on the table. She did not open it yet. She looked at the room for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to let them understand that she was not nervous, had never been nervous, would not be nervous today, and then she spoke. "My name is Juliet Ademi. I am a Nigerian communications consultant and the biological mother of Kang Seojin, age 5, currently residing in Seoul, South Korea." She paused, let the name land, let the cameras find their angles. This case is about child abduction, medical fraud and corporate manipulation carried out across 2 countries over a period of 6 years. Today I am filing civil and criminal charges in both Nigeria and the Republic of Korea simultaneously. The room erupted. Cameras flashed all at once, a sustained burst of white light that turned the room briefly electric. 3 journalists spoke at the same time. Someone in the back row knocked over a water glass and didn't stop to pick it up. A reporter from a Korean news agency was already on her phone, typing before Juliet had finished her sentence. She waited. She had prepared for this. She let them have their 30 seconds of noise, and then she raised one hand just slightly, and the room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when the person at the front has something the rest of them need. "I will take questions after the full statement," she said. "Not before." She opened the folder. What she laid out in the next 14 minutes was not a story. It was a case. There is a difference. A story can be dismissed, contextualized, reframed by people with expensive lawyers and press contacts, and 40 years of knowing how narrative gets managed. A case has documents. A case has account numbers and dates and correspondence, and the kind of specificity that does not bend under pressure because it was never built to. She presented the DNA confirmation first. 3 independent laboratories, the percentage match between her genetic material and Seojin's, 100% maternity confirmed. She placed the printed summary on the table and slid it toward the nearest camera without looking at it. A journalist in the second row leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered something. The woman beside her did not respond. She was staring at the document summary on the screen behind Juliet with the expression of someone doing arithmetic they didn't expect to add up. Then the financial trail. A private account controlled by legal counsel associated with Kang Corporation. Transfers made in 2 installments to a registered medical facility in Abuja, Nigeria. The dates corresponding precisely to the weeks surrounding what Juliet had been told was a medical emergency requiring specialist intervention. The amounts corresponding to what it costs, apparently, to staff a clinic, manufacture a complication, sedate a woman 8 months pregnant, and produce a death certificate for a child who was not dead. Someone in the press gallery dropped a pen. The sound was sharp in the silence. Nobody moved to pick it up. Then the death certificate itself. She held it up. Let the cameras get what they needed. Put it back down. Then the internal correspondence. 3 emails between Choi Yoon-young, senior legal counsel for Kang Corporation, and a private security contractor whose services, the emails made clear, extended beyond what any legitimate legal firm should be arranging. The emails did not name Juliet directly. They referred to her as the subject. They referred to the baby as the matter. They referred to the clinic as the facility. The language was careful and professional, and it described the organized abduction of a full-term infant from its mother's body with the same tone you might use to discuss a property transfer. Juliet let the journalists read the copies her team distributed. She watched their faces. She had spent 6 years learning to read rooms. She knew what genuine shock looked like versus performed shock. What she saw in that press conference room was genuine. Even the most seasoned journalists in the front row, people who had covered wars and corruption and corporate crime at the highest levels, were looking at those emails with expressions that said, "I did not think this was the kind of thing that actually happened." "This was not a mistake," Juliet said quietly into the microphone, into the silence. "It was a system." By the time she left the hotel, the story had broken in Seoul. The Kang Corporation communications team found out the same way everyone else did, through a news alert on their phones at 9:47 in the morning. The head of communications, a man named Park Sung-ho, who had spent 11 years managing the Kang family's public narrative through 3 mergers, 2 government investigations, and 1 very difficult divorce, read the alert twice and then called his deputy and said 4 words: "Get everyone in now." The boardroom on level 31, the same building where Juliet had once taken the wrong elevator, the same view of the Han River she had once stopped to look at, was full within 20 minutes. Lawyers, PR strategists, the CFO, 2 board members who had driven in from Gangnam, all of them talking at once about containment and response windows and whether the Korean press could be managed and what the international angle meant for the share price. Kang Byung-ho sat at the head of the table. He was the only person in the room who was not talking. He was looking at the printed copy of Juliet's press conference statement that someone had placed in front of him. He was reading it with the same careful, unhurried attention he brought to everything. His expression had not changed. His posture had not changed. He looked, to anyone in that room who did not know him well, like a man who was simply gathering information before responding. Yi Min, who knew him better than anyone, could see the precise location where the composure was costing him. Yi Min was standing by the window. He had not sat down. He had not contributed to the conversation around the table. He had arrived because his assistant had called and said his presence was required, and he had come and he had stood at the window with his hands in his pockets, and he had listened to 45 minutes of people discussing how to protect a family that had done what his family had done, and he had felt something settle inside him with the cold finality of a decision already made. Park Sung-ho turned to him. "Yi Min SSI, we need a unified family statement by this afternoon." Something that questions the evidence, raises doubt about the timeline, positions the family as, "No," Yi Min said. The room went quiet. "No unified statement," he said. "No questioning of the evidence, no press management." He looked at the table, at all of them. "The evidence is real. Every document she presented is real. Attempting to dispute it will not protect this family. It will only add obstruction to the list of things we have already done." His father looked at him from the head of the table. "You would let them dismantle everything your grandfather built, everything I built, for a woman who, for the truth," Yi Min said. The words came out very quiet and very final. "She did not do this to us. We did this to ourselves, 6 years ago, in a clinic in Abuja, and every day since that we chose not to look at it." He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair he had never sat in. "I am done choosing not to look at it." He left the boardroom. The silence behind him lasted a long moment. Then Park Sung-ho's phone rang, and the room went back to its panic, and Kang Byung-ho sat at the head of the table with his hands folded, and his face composed and something in his eyes that was, for the first time in a very long time, not certainty. For the first time in his life, Kang Yi-min stood in the elevator going down from the 31st floor and realized, with the clarity of someone who has finally stopped looking away, that power could not fix what his family had broken. It could only, if he let it, make the breaking harder to see. He had been letting it do exactly that for 6 years. He was done. In Abuja, the Nigerian Medical Council's investigative team arrived at the clinic on a Wednesday morning with federal warrants and 4 officers, and the specific, unhurried energy of people who have been given everything they need and intend to use all of it. The clinic had not closed. That was the first interesting thing. Whatever the people who ran it had expected to happen after Juliet's press conference, they had apparently decided that closing would look worse than staying open. So the receptionist was at her desk, and the waiting room had patients, and the framed certificates were still on the walls when the investigators walked through the front door. Dr. Emeka Osai was not there. He had not been there since the morning after the press conference. His apartment in Wus II was empty. His phone went to voicemail. His name, the investigators would discover within 48 hours, was not on any Nigerian Medical Council registration database, which meant the framed certificate on his office wall was as manufactured as everything else in the building. The nurse who had been in the consultation room the day Juliet was sedated was there. Her name was Blessing Ez, and she was 29 years old when the lead investigator sat across from her in the clinic manager's office with the financial records spread on the desk between them and explained in precise and careful detail what the clinic had been used for. Blessing Ez put her face in her hands. She talked for 3 hours. She described the day Juliet came in. She described Dr. Osai's instructions. She described the consultation room and the tray and what happened after. She described the vehicle that arrived at the clinic's back entrance 2 hours later, Then she said the thing that made the lead investigator set down his pen. "The baby was crying," she said. Her voice had gone very small. "When they took him, he was healthy, full term. He was crying the way healthy Barbies cry, and the man who took him, he wrapped him in a blue carrier and he got in the vehicle and he drove away and She stopped. She pressed her hands harder against her face. "I asked Dr. Osai where the baby was going. He said it was going home. I thought he meant an orphanage or a foster arrangement, something legal. Something," she stopped again. "He told us we were helping, that the mother had agreed, that the documents were all in order." The investigator waited. "There were no documents," she said. "Were there?" "No," the investigator said. She signed her statement at 4:15 in the afternoon. But what Blessing Ez had not known, what none of the clinic staff below Dr. Osa had known, was the specific destination of that blue carrier and its contents. The investigators uncovered it in the financial records 3 days later. A second payment, not to the clinic, to a private courier service. With a delivery address in Seongbukdong, Seoul, the Kang family residence, Seojin had not been handed to a government system or an intermediary or a hospital. He had been driven from the back of a clinic in Abuja, placed in a private aircraft chartered under a shell company name, and delivered, living, healthy, full-term and crying, directly to the home of Kang Byung-ho, where a story had been prepared. Where Yi-min had been told 3 days later that a child had been found, the result, Byung-ho said, of a relationship Yi-min had not known about, with a woman who had died in childbirth and left no family. A child that was his, a child that needed him. Yi-min had believed it because he had been destroyed by grief, and because the child was real and needed him, and because believing anything else would have required him to look at his father and see something he had not been ready to see. When this detail broke in the press, the camera footage of journalists outside the Seoul courthouse showed 3 people who had been waiting for updates simply stop moving. One woman put her hand over her mouth. A man beside her looked at his phone and then looked up at the building and then looked back at his phone as if he was hoping the screen had changed. The baby had been hand-delivered, to the grandfather, like a package, like a matter that had been resolved. In Nigeria, justice moved on its own timeline and with its own teeth. The Nigerian Medical Council's formal disciplinary hearing convened 3 weeks after the investigator's report was filed. The clinic's operating license was revoked on the first day of the hearing, effective immediately. The building was sealed. The patients currently registered were transferred to legitimate facilities under a federal health directive. The framed certificates that had decorated the walls, every single one of them, were confirmed as forgeries and entered into evidence. Blessing Ez appeared before the disciplinary panel voluntarily. She had not been a licensed medical practitioner. Her employment at the clinic had been arranged under falsified credentials, a fact she had not known when she accepted the position, and a fact the panel verified through independent investigation. She was not struck off a register she had never legitimately been on, but she was formally cautioned, her cooperation noted, and her testimony used to build the case against those above her. She left the hearing room with the particular expression of someone who has told the truth at significant personal cost and is not yet sure whether it was worth it. The panel's notes recorded that she had acted with conscience when it mattered. That notation would follow her. The 2 nurses who had assisted in the operating room on the day Juliet was sedated were a different matter. Both held legitimate Nigerian nursing licenses. Both had participated in the procedure with full knowledge. The panel determined that no valid consent had been obtained. Both licenses were revoked permanently. Neither would practice medicine in Nigeria again. One attempted to appeal. The appeal was denied in 4 weeks, a speed that suggested the panel had anticipated it. The clinic's administrative director, a man who had managed the facility's paperwork and finances and had processed both wire transfers from the Cayman Shell account, was charged with conspiracy, fraud and accessory to child abduction. He was arrested at his home in Abuja on a Tuesday morning and did not make bail. The fake Dr. Emeka Osai, whose real name the investigators confirmed was Femi Ajora, a disbarred medical practitioner whose license had been revoked by the Nigerian Medical Council 8 years earlier for a separate case of medical fraud in Port Harcourt, was extradited from Accra under the bilateral agreement and stood trial in Abuja. The charges were comprehensive: practicing medicine under false identity, administering sedation without consent, conspiracy to commit child abduction and fraud. The trial lasted 11 days. The verdict took the jury 4 hours. He was sentenced to 14 years without the possibility of early release. The judge, in delivering the sentence, used a single line that the Nigerian press quoted extensively. Following morning, "You wore the clothes of a healer and did the work of a criminal. This court will not be lenient about the distance between those two things. The clinic building was later demolished. The lot it stood on was acquired by the federal government under asset forfeiture proceedings. There was a proposal, still under discussion at the time of the Seoul ruling, to build a legitimate maternal health clinic on the same ground, one that would serve the Abuja communities the criminal facility had exploited. Nothing had been confirmed, but the proposal existed. Sometimes that is where correction begins. Juliet was informed of the Nigerian sentencing outcomes by her attorney on the same morning as the Seoul ruling. She read the summary. She set it down on the table beside the grey stone Seojin had left on her hotel nightstand the evening before. She did not celebrate that either, but she kept the summary. She folded it carefully and placed it in the same folder as the fake death certificate, not beside it but on top of it, covering it. The way truth, when it finally arrives, covers the lie that tried to replace it. The payment records the investigators pulled from the clinic's accounts told the rest. 2 wire transfers. Originating account traced through a shell company in the Cayman Islands to a legal services firm in Seoul. The firm, Choi and Associates. The senior partner, Choi Yoon-young. The warrant for Choi Yoon-young's arrest was issued on a Thursday. She turned herself in on Friday morning, accompanied by her own lawyer, with the composed and calculating energy of someone who had already decided that cooperation was the most strategic option available. She sat in an interview room in Seoul, and she answered questions for 6 hours, and she gave them everything: names, dates, the specific instructions she had received, the specific instructions she had passed along, with the precision of someone who had kept very good records and was now using those records to negotiate the terms of her own accountability. The name she gave most frequently was Kang Byung-ho. The formal hearing was set for a Tuesday in October, in a Seoul courtroom that had been requested to accommodate the press presence and need, and then requested again through a different channel and finally granted with restrictions. The International Press Gallery was full. The Korean Public Gallery was full. 3 Nigerian government observers sat in the 3rd row behind Juliet's legal team. Juliet wore dark blue. She sat straight. She had not slept well the night before, not from fear, but from the particular restlessness of someone who has been waiting a long time for something and finds, when it finally arrives, that their body doesn't know how to be still. Her lead attorney, Adiz Okafor, leaned over before the proceedings began and said, "You know what you're going to say." "I know," Juliet said. "Don't perform it, just say it." "I know," Juliet said again. When she was called to testify, she walked to the witness position and she sat down and she looked at the room. The press gallery, the observers, the defense table where Kang Byung-ho sat with 4 lawyers, and the specific diminished quality of a man who has been powerful for so long that powerlessness has made him look physically smaller, and she began. She described the relationship. She described the kitchen conversation the night Yimin came to tell her about his father's ultimatum. She described the morning Choi Yoon-young arrived at her apartment. She described the flight to Lagos, the 8 months of building a new life, the phone call, the overnight bus to Abuja, 8 months pregnant, moving carefully, telling herself this was routine. She described the clinic, the waiting room, the corridor that turned twice, the ultrasound screen that faced away from her, the 5 clinical questions she asked and the answers that were almost right but not quite. She described the consultation room, the nurse, the tray, the syringe. She described waking up. She described pressing both hands to her stomach and understanding before any words were said what had been done to her. She described the death certificate, the grief counseling card, the 20-minute gap in the timeline, the consent form she had never signed. She said all of it without her voice breaking, not because she was not feeling it. The courtroom could see that she was feeling all of it, the weight of it moving across her face in slow and controlled waves, but because she had decided that the most powerful thing she could do in that room was be completely clear. Grief was real, anger was real, but clarity was what the court needed, and clarity was what she gave them. Then the defense asked their single most important question. Ms. Ademi, the lead defense attorney, said, "Can you confirm that at no point did you actually see the child removed from your care?" The room went very still. Juliet looked at the attorney for a long moment. "I was sedated without my consent," she said. "I was unconscious. No, I did not see it happen." She paused. "I was told my child died, but I never saw a body, only documents. And we have now established in evidence presented to this court that those documents were manufactured." Another pause. "So what exactly is your question?" The defense attorney sat down. The court reporter's fingers had stopped moving over her keyboard. She started again a moment later. The judge made a note. 3 people in the press gallery were typing simultaneously, and all of them had written the same line. The prosecution did not need a follow-up. The defense collapsed across the following 2 days with the particular speed of structures that were never built to withstand scrutiny, only to avoid it. The clinic staff's testimonies were consistent with each other, and consistent with the financial records, and consistent with the internal Kang correspondence. The shell company traced to Choi, and associates traced to instructions that traced, in 3 documented communications, directly to Kang Byung-ho. The defense attempted to argue that Byung-ho had been acting in what he believed were his family's best interests, that no direct order to harm Juliet had been given, that the specific details of the Abuja operation had been handled entirely by Choi Yoon-young without his full knowledge of the methods involved. The prosecution produced an email. It was dated 2 weeks before Juliet's bus journey to Abuja. It was from Byung-ho's personal account to Choi Yoon-young's firm account. It said, in 4 lines of careful Korean that the court translator read aloud into a room that had stopped breathing, the matter must be resolved permanently before the birth. The child cannot be part of this family's record. Ensure there is nothing to contest afterward. Someone in the public gallery made a sound that was not quite a word. The judge did not reprimand them, perhaps because the judge had also needed a moment. The defense had no response that the court found useful. The arrest warrants were issued the same afternoon. Kang Byung-ho, Choi Yoon-young, whose cooperation agreement reduced her charges but did not eliminate them. The clinic's founding director, whose real name was not Emeka Osai, who was located in Accra, Ghana, 11 days later, and extradited under the terms of a bilateral agreement that his lawyers had apparently not anticipated existed. Asset freezes were ordered on 3 Kang Corporation accounts pending the civil proceedings. The share price dropped 17% in 2 days. 2 board members resigned. The Government Contract Review Board announced it was reopening 3 infrastructure contracts that had been awarded to Kang subsidiaries in the previous 4 years. Yi-min watched all of it. He had given his own testimony in the 2nd week, voluntary, uncoerced, without his family's lawyers present. He sat in the same witness position Juliet had occupied, and he described the conversation with his father the night Juliet left. He described what he had been told, that she had chosen to go, that she had wanted nothing further to do with him or the family. He described the years of believing it. He described the gala. He described the DNA results. He described the morning he walked into his father's study and his father had sat behind a mahogany desk and justified it. Then he described the thing he had not known until the investigators' report, the blue carrier, the private aircraft. Delivery to Seongbuk-dong, the story his father had constructed about a woman who had died in childbirth and left a child behind. He handed me my son, Yi-min said. His voice was even. It cost him to keep it even, and the court could see that cost. He handed me my son and told me a story, and I believed it because I needed to believe something, and because I did not understand yet what my father was capable of. He paused. I understand now. He did not cry. He also did not perform composure. He simply told the truth in full and let the court do what courts are supposed to do with it. After his testimony, he walked past the defense table. He did not look at his father. His father did not speak. The initial ruling came on a Friday morning. Medical fraud confirmed, child abduction confirmed, corporate interference in a private individual's medical care confirmed. The criminal sentencing hearings would follow in the coming months, but the civil ruling was immediate. Juliet Ademi was confirmed as the biological mother of Kang Seojin. Her parental rights, which had never legally been terminated because no legal process had ever actually occurred, were fully recognized by both the Nigerian and Korean courts under the bilateral agreement Adiz Okafor had spent 4 months constructing. Juliet sat in the courtroom and heard the ruling, and she did not celebrate. She sat very still. Adiz touched her arm. It's done, she said quietly. Juliet nodded. Once, she looked at the ceiling for a moment, white, institutional. Not so different from another ceiling she had stared at once in a recovery room in Abuja, and she let herself feel just for that moment the full distance between then and now. What it had cost, what it had taken, what she had carried without knowing she was carrying it, and what she had carried knowing exactly how heavy it was. Then she stood up, straightened her jacket, picked up her folder. Outside the courthouse, the media was waiting. Cameras, microphones, reporters with the specific hungry energy of people who have been covering a story for weeks and know they are at the final moment of it. Juliet walked through the doors and the noise rose immediately, and she walked to the cluster of microphones that her team had arranged, and she stood there in the October light, and she waited for the noise to settle. It settled. I want to say one thing, she said, not for the cameras. For anyone who has ever been told that the truth they know in their body is not real, that the loss they feel is not legitimate, that the power arrayed against them is simply too large to fight. She paused. It is not too large, it is only too large if you stop. Another pause. Justice is not revenge, it is correction, and today something that was wrong has been corrected. She stepped back from the microphones. A car was waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps. She walked toward it. The media followed for a few steps and then stopped, because there was something in her walk, not hurried, not triumphant, just complete, that made following feel beside the point. She reached the car. The door was already open. Inside, pressed against the far window with a small smooth grey stone in his hand that he had apparently brought from the garden and had not let go of since, was Seo-jin. He looked up when she got in. His expression was the expression she was beginning to understand was simply his, serious and certain, and already somewhere the rest of the world was still trying to reach. "Did you win?" he asked. She looked at him for a moment, at his jaw, his eyes. The birthmark she knew was under his jacket on his left shoulder, shaped like a small leaf. "Yes," she said. He nodded, satisfied, and returned to examining his stone. Like winning was simply what she was supposed to do. Like he had never doubted it for a single day. She looked out the window. Yimin was standing at the bottom of the courthouse steps, slightly apart from the remaining press, watching the car. Their eyes met through the glass. Neither of them moved, neither of them needed to. There were things between them that a courtroom could not resolve and that a garden afternoon had only begun to approach. Both of them knew it. Both of them, for now, were willing to let that be what it was. Seo-jin leaned against her side without looking up from his stone. She let him. The car pulled away from the courthouse and into the Seoul afternoon, and Juliet looked out at the city. The Han River somewhere beyond the buildings, silver and wide, the same river she had once stopped to look at on the 31st floor of a building she wasn't supposed to be on, 23 years old and bright-eyed, and not yet carrying what she would carry. She was 31 now. She had carried it. She had set it down in the right place. That was enough. For today, that was exactly enough. If you watched both parts, tell me this: did justice feel like enough, or does Yimin still owe her more? Drop your answer below. And if this story hit you the way I think it did, hit that like button and subscribe. I will see you in the next one.